We were reconfiguring a little bit of the room here in preparation. Is this good? Of recognizing some of what happened at the Colorado Space Grant Robotics Challenge. This has been an ongoing event within Space Grant for about the past 10 years. Dr. Randy Emmons down at Adams State University started this event off with his close collaborations with the National Park Service and the Great Sand Dunes National Park. Adams State University is in Alamosa, Colorado, which is just about 40 minutes or so away from town. So it's fantastic that we have this great resource every year. I love the robotics. One, you have a lot of fun with it. You do a lot of tinkering. You burn up a lot of components. You let the magic smoke out of components. And I'm a firm believer that's the only way that you learn things. And it's so cool to hear Adam having some of the same experiences with zero gauge wire even. So we have a great time down at the Robotics Challenge. There's a lot of history behind it here in Colorado, circling back to a lot of the industry in Colorado with aerospace, and specifically the Viking Mars lander missions in the 1970s. Have actually taken hardware from Lockheed Martin down to the sand dunes to test it out on what we thought would be the closest analog to a Martian environment that's within reason of Colorado and the US. Really amazing robots are designed. Some teams are doing this for the first year, learning about motors, Arduinos, more and more complex microcontrollers, RF systems, the whole 9 yards. It's, I think, a really great way to get some fantastic experience and get that sort of JPL experience of exploring a far out world. The past few years we've been growing in numbers. Last year we were about up to 100 or so participants. We create different Martian-like terrain from just flat sand, you know, kind of a little bit of a washboard, to more sporty terrain of pits and rocks and physical obstacles that you can't get around. All the robots are supposed to be about the size of a cat and relatively cheap. But it's really to challenge the teams from all across the state. Over the past few years, we've had teams from Utah, New Mexico, and some of the neighboring Colorado states get interested in participating. And this year, we had a couple teams from high school and middle schools getting signed up, which is fantastic for getting those next generation of students down there. So that was kind of over the past 10 years. This year, it was a lot colder. There was a lot more snow. This is one of the pictures of one of the teams from CSU Fort Collins with their hamster ball. I think a really cool locomotion design. The Robotics Challenge is great for electronics, but it's also for exploring different ways of movement. And what Adam was telling us about, you know, it's kind of hard to rotate a ball in terms of a robot. It's a lot easier to have 4 wheels or a quadcopter, but there's been some very creative designs. Not all the teams were able to make it down for obvious reasons. Travel is a major concern, and it really depended upon each institution to figure out what the right decision for them was. Some teams, the teams from Adams State, from Alamosa, they didn't have to travel very far. They were all there. We had some teams from CSU Fort Collins, all up and down along the Front Range, Gunnison and Fort Lewis, down in Durango, all come in attendance. The night before is fantastic, and I think that's one of the best parts where a lot of the teams collaborate, figure out and share ideas about how the electronics work together, last minute tinkering if there is some, usually there's a little bit. And then we went out to the dunes. At the very beginning of the day, it was okay. The snow had stopped, you know, on the way from Alamosa out to the dunes. There was even parts of the San Luis Valley that it didn't look like there was a whole lot of snow anywhere. But of course, by the time we got back up to the dunes are there for a reason. It's this really cool geological kind of bottleneck in the San Luis Valley as all the wind gets funneled in, and that's when all of the sand kind of falls out and creates the dunes. Well, we were right there. So there's a little bit of wind in the San Luis Valley, but a little bit more where we were. But this is just amazing for me. Just seeing, one, the robots, but then all the people that came out. We had just about 100 people out there on the dunes, given the snow, given the transportation difficulties, and this doesn't even represent all of the students from around the state that participated. So really cool designs, very creative weatherization designs too. Some of the robots down here, Rebecca has a little umbrella over the top that they made the night before to keep the snow off. The center one is actually an NVIDIA processor that is able to take a look in visible spectrum, understand where there's obstacles, highlight paths, and then be able to navigate through those obstacles. Some really interesting robotic visualization skills. And he'd come to the Robotics Challenge a couple years, went to an NVIDIA conference and got some awards through that as well. His robot didn't have a name before the competition. It was Amazonus Primus, because he had an Amazon Prime box with cellophane on the top side to waterproof it. It's really funny how ubiquitous those boxes are now for just about anything. But right now I'd like to recognize a couple of the teams that really just went over and beyond with what they were able to demonstrate. And some of the teams that I'm recognizing today are some of the teams that went down to Alamosa, and some of the teams weren't able to travel. But in light of the weather the week before, I wanted everyone to still be participating in the Robotics Challenge even if they weren't able to go, so I had people submit YouTube videos and kind of video essays of what they did for their build and their robot navigating in their Mars-like environment that they were able to create. We had teams from all the way north, all the way down south to Trinidad, creating obstacles and terrain that looked like the Martian environment. It was just really amazing to see these robots in action. So the first team that I'd like to recognize, and as history, at least over the past couple years, dictates, I make these little trophies. These are highly coveted. They're made out of Legos. And for me, the inspiration behind it is that's what a lot of good engineering projects is all about, is taking individual parts and building up the foundation for that. And obviously the Mars Science Laboratory MSL up on top. So these are the coveted trophies going to the advisors and the teams, and you all can figure out how this one awesome trophy should be displayed right next to any of like the football trophies that your school might have won in the past, because this is more important. So the first team I'd like to recognize is the Alligator team from Community College of Aurora, and their actual name is Gantor. So if any of those students are still here, come on up. Awesome. And you had one more team member, right?
Yeah, but she was...
Okay.